Before I introduce Vice President Danny Ashley, who will introduce the program, I want to make an important notice this evening. If you came here expecting to get a sample or a tasting, you didn't hear it from us, okay? Without any further ado, Danny, introduce your program.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll start it off with a tasting, because it was about 10 years ago, Andy, I think it was, maybe. And Andy came up and spoke before the Historical Society, and back in those days, our membership kind of skewed older, and maybe a little bit more religious, seems like 10 years ago. So anyway, Andy and Charlie came up and spoke, and then announced at the end if anybody would like maybe just to get a little taste. Now, not a shot, but just a little taste. And they had it in these little, you probably don't remember this. But,
Oh, I remember.
Oh, you do remember? Okay, very good. Well, anyway, long story short, when he said that, all those Baptist women and Church of Christ men jumped up, and they had a line all the way the length of the building, and they all wanted their little taste. So, but anyway, we're not doing it again tonight, so sorry. All right, and we do have a wonderful guest speaker for you tonight, and I'm delighted to say he's not a stranger to the Robertson County Historical Society or to the Robertson County. He's, like I said, he spoke here a few years back. However, before we get to tonight's program, we got two other programs coming up. And first one is Black Patch 3, Conversation about the Night Riders. Did you know the longest and most violent conflict between the Civil War and the civil rights struggles of the 1960s took place right here in northern Middle Tennessee and southern Middle Kentucky? So get ready for an incredible opportunity to learn about the Black Patch Tobacco Wars from 3 leading experts. Join us on September the 14th at 6 p.m. at the Robertson County History Museum for Black Patch 3, a conversation about the Night Riders. You get to hear from Kentucky Supreme Court Justice Bill Cunningham, who's the author of On Bended Knees, which tells much of the story about that event. Rick Gregory, PhD from Adams, Tennessee, our own Robertson Countyman, whose latest book, The Bell Witch in Myth and Memory, was recently published by the University of Tennessee Press. Rick wanted to make sure that I got this announcement in about that. With a new book on the Night Riders coming soon. And then also William T. Turner, the official historian for Hopkinsville, Kentucky. These people will be here speaking that night. Tickets are just $20 and include a barbecue sandwich, chips, a cookie, and a drink. And don't miss this chance to delve into history with the Black Patch 3 one more time. So that's coming up on September the 14th, Saturday. All right, and then our next event, we also have another great program coming for you, which is provided by the White House Inn and Museum. That'll be taking place on Monday, September the 16th, so it'll be the Monday after the 14th. Historical Society Membership Picnic, that's our annual picnic, which will be held at the White House Inn. It starts at 6 p.m., and the museum is located, for those of you Springfield people who don't know where White House is, it's 412 Highway 76 in White House. That night, we also have another great program for you, because it'll be provided by their museum director, Susan Hallcroft, who is the director of the White House Museum. Plus, that's not all. They've decided to honor the Robertson County Historical Society, because we're coming there that night. So they're going to host a ribbon cutting on their new, really incredible outdoor exhibit, which is a reproduction of a team of horses, life-size, pulling a full-scale stagecoach. Folks, when you see and you arrive and see these horses, they look real. When I pulled up there a couple of weeks ago and saw them, I thought, what are those horses doing out in front of the museum? It turns out they're not real, but they certainly look real, and the stagecoach looks like it came out of a Western movie. All right. That night, we'll also learn about the White House Inn that stood along a well-traveled trail between Louisville and Nashville in the 1830s. That was a stagecoach stop. That's why it got its name. One of the more famous stops on that route in the 19th century. And also, since this is a picnic, we'll be dining at the White House Inn and Museum. With the board of directors will be furnishing delicious barbecue that'll be cooked by Society member Dwayne Sword, And then plus in years past, we'll provide the drinks, and the members and board members furnish side dishes and dessert. So when you get an opportunity, please send it Janet Palmore, the museum director, your reservation along with what you plan to bring, whether it be a side item or dessert, so we'll know how much barbecue to prepare for Dwayne to cook for us. Okay, that's all the announcements I got, other than I need to introduce our guest speaker. Does anybody got any questions about the two programs? Say now or forever hold your peace. Okay. All right, for tonight's program, Andy Nelson is a founder and former head distiller for Nelson's Brier Distillery here in Nashville, Tennessee. His passion for the industry was ignited in 2006 upon discovering his family's legendary whiskey history dating back to the 1860s. Since that day, he worked tirelessly to resurrect the business, the brands, and the distillery, which opened to the public in 2014. Andy's experience ranges from formulating a business plan and launching to scaling the business and successfully exiting it, and then everything in between. Andy lives in Nashville with his wife Kristin, their 3 children, and their Golden Retriever Clyde. Now, he didn't mention the kids, but he did mention Clyde. So, without further ado, let's give a big Robertson County welcome to Andy Nelson. Yes, no, you're good.
Okay, I'll do it there. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Paul and Danny for that wonderful introduction. I can only hope that this here talk will be just as intoxicating as a spirit would be, but I'm sorry I don't have any whiskey for you. What I'm going to do, basically, by the way, I just can't believe, was it only 10 years ago that I mean, it wasn't here in this building.
No, we were across the street at the Senior Citizens Building.
Yeah. And I feel like that was more like 12 years
It
ago.
might have been. I'm going by my memory.
Yeah. So they were community
You're the one
cups
that brought the whiskey.
that we let everybody taste on. I am a pretty casual, informal guy. So if you guys have any questions for me in the middle of this, feel free to raise your hand or yell at me or whatever it is, and I'll see if it's worthy for a response. So one of the things that I wanted to address up front is that short, quick bio of me. It must have been that I had a word count, which is why I left my children's names out of it, the dog. But part of it said and successfully exiting the business, and that is because I have actually left the distillery. My brother Charlie left about a year ago. I left in March, so it's been almost 6 months since I've been out. And so I only say that to let you know that I am officially representing my family and our history here in Robertson County in the distillery, but not technically as a representative of Nelson's Green Brier Distillery as a company. So I'm happy to go into more of what that looks like and why, if anybody's interested. It's not quite as interesting, though, as the whole actual history and story. So I know a handful of people in here have already heard this a time or 3, or probably helped us add a bit to this story, in fact. But I'm going to go, what I want to do is talk about, I think, I'm going to go in a little bit of the reverse order of how we usually tell this story. And that is to say, I'm going to start in 2006 when we kind of stumbled upon this history, very, just down the street from here. And in fact, spent plenty of time in this building looking through various archives and photos and things like that. But I'm going to start in 2006, and then I'm going to kind of go back in time and show you, our journey from then until now. So, yes, so 2006 was the year. I had just graduated from college in 2005, a year prior, and my brothers had a semester left, and before he graduated. And our dad had this friend who somehow had a connection to a guy named Chuck Grissom, a butcher, who lives down on Distillery Road. And our plan was for Dad and 3 of his buddies to get a full cow worth of meat from Chuck, put it in the freezer, and just eat it for a year or however long it took us. So Dad asked us, me and Charlie and Mom, if we wanted to go help him pick up the cow. This was probably June. It was the summer of 2006. And we said, sure. Now, what we had known before that of our family history in the distillery was quite vague. So there were these pretty, well, I'll say vague again, these vague kind of wistful notions over the years at various family functions, whether it be an actual, you know, family reunion or just Thanksgiving or whatever. And I remember hearing, but by the way, I was born in 1982, so in the early mid-90s, I was like a little kid, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, and hearing these things. You know, drunk uncles talking about if only we could get these, you know, find that old spring and get this whiskey thing back up and running. And so I didn't really know what that meant. I probably didn't even know what whiskey was at that time. And so, but it was in my head. Something there was in my head. I knew that there was some sort of whiskey thing. So, and we'd also heard this story that Dad would tell. And Dad was he was a very good storyteller and very much went by the motto of kind of never letting the truth get in the way of a good story kind of a thing. And I, as a little kid, I have this thing in my head where I'm much better at it now because I'm a, you know, full-grown adult and I have some awareness, but I had really a lot of trouble taking things kind of with a grain of salt. Everything was kind of literal to me when I was a kid. And so when Dad would tell these stories, I thought he was just like full of beans, you know. I'm like, can I cuss around here? You guys mind? No, I'm kidding. So I thought Dad was just really full of it, and my mom kind of would tease me about it too, or she would tease Dad really about it, and that's what made me think that he was just like making this stuff up. And so there was this one story about someone in our family, one of our ancestors, coming over from Germany on a boat with the family fortune in gold sewn into his clothing, falling overboard, and then the family, you know, the rest of the family, you know, getting safely to the U.S. and by way of New York City. And there were slightly more details to it, but again, I mean, Dad was probably in his third glass of wine by the time he could tell this story ever at the head of the table. And so, me in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, Mom was kind of teasing him about embellishing his stories all the time, and so I think Dad's like, why would you just make this up? Like, why would you not just tell the truth? So anyway, that's just backstory for when 2006 comes along. So we go over down to Distillery Road, and on our way there, we stopped to get gas at what was then the Citgo station, and now it's, what is that, Mobile, or just changed. Anyway, right at the corner of Main Street and well, Distillery Road, really. Or I guess it's Springfield Highway and Main Street. Turns into Distillery Road, right? And we stopped to get gas, and we didn't even think anything of it, and then we see this historical marker that you've probably all seen. It says on Nelson's Greenbrier Distillery. And it says, 1 mile east on Long Branch, Charles Nelson opened the Greenbrier Distillery in 1870. It goes on to talk about everything, you know, the economic prosperity brought about to the town and the county and all this, and the finest producers of Tennessee whiskeys and fruit brandies, et cetera, et cetera. And we kind of froze for a second. This is from my perspective. It was me and Charlie in the back seat thinking like, wait, we knew there was some whiskey thing in the town of Greenbrier, but we hadn't been to Greenbrier before. We lived in Nashville. And so we kind of had to process for a second, but we went and read the sign, and we realized this is us, right? Like Charles Nelson, this whiskey thing, what is happening here? And so it was this really bizarre, kind of surreal moment, but we're still just pumping gas. So we filled the car up and we head over to Chuck's house, slash slaughterhouse, I guess was right behind it, pick up our meat. And when we got there, we asked Chuck what he knew about the old distillery. He said, well, you're standing on it right here, look across the street. And there was, of course, the old barrel warehouse and all the stuff that you probably know about here. And we went into the barrel house, and so of course now it still smells like tobacco, but there's nothing. I mean, I appreciate it goes from smelling like all whiskey to tobacco, and like, I don't know, it's really nice, nice good warm feelings for me. If not for everybody else, but that's okay. We don't have samples here, so just imagine. But it was just this amazing feeling of knowing that every moment was perhaps more surreal than the last, because it was all sinking in that this was our family, and we didn't know really anything about it. We had heard these wild stories that Dad told that I thought he was making up, and so it was all just kind of hitting me over the next hour as we kind of put the pieces all together. So we went, in the barrel warehouse, went and drank from the spring, which was maybe slightly dangerous, but we were all fine. No E. coli or anything like that. It's all good. And, and we were just kind of talking about it, and we're just amazed, all of us. It was me, Charlie, Mom, and Dad. And so then Chuck told us, we loaded the meat up in the car, and he said, go over to Brier Historical Society just back, from where you came, and we went. And it was our first time there, of course. And we're just kind of like, look at this place. Like, this is really it. And then, of course, we go into the room with all the Brier Distillery paraphernalia. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's what I'm going to go with. And among those things was this little glass case of these 2 original bottles of Brier Tennessee whiskey with our name on it. And they were, of course, empty, but not of course. No one knows that they're empty until I tell them that. They picture this beautiful, perfect 150-year-old whiskey bottle, but they're empty, but it had our name on it, Chaz Nelson. And it was just this, perhaps the most surreal moment of all, realizing like that, in that moment, we knew this is what we're here to do. Because like I said, I was a year out of college, Charlie still had a semester left. We didn't have, our own families or kids or careers or anything like that. We both studied philosophy. We were not on any particular course, for business or whatever. We laugh now, but want to have a trivia contest? Bet you can't tell me what Immanuel Kant was famous for. That's a philosopher. He was famous for always being very much on time, and also other philosophical things that, frankly, I don't remember or care about. But it was interesting to study that, because what I knew about myself was that when I was in college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I thought I knew what I didn't want to do, which was, for me, just sitting at a desk looking at a computer all the time. I needed to get out, go do stuff, travel, see the world, learn different languages, culture, eat different foods, see people, and it turned out that this opportunity to start the family business back with whiskey was the perfect opportunity and angle to do all of those things. What we saw was this ability in the future. We knew we'd have to build things and grow them, but this opportunity to, in the future, travel the world telling and sharing our story over a glass of whiskey with people. And that, as romantic and maybe impractical as it sounds, is totally practical when you actually have a whiskey distillery and you're trying to sell it all around the world. So it's kind of an amazing thing. Now, I have never traveled internationally for work in the whiskey business. That's not true. Anyway, not that great stories, but so it was this amazing sort of romantic idea that we had, and it was like the timing was perfect. So we started doing things like asking ourselves, what is a business? What is whiskey? How do you make it? How do you do any of these things? Well, you got to raise money, you got to build a business plan, you got to learn what whiskey is even made of. I didn't even know that. I didn't know whiskey, came off the still clear and came out of the barrel brown. So there was, we were at level 0, beginner level. I had, partaken in my fair share of whiskey over the years in college, and I was more of a beer pong guy myself, so I had a lot of learning to do with the American whiskey landscape. But that's where we started, and really the first people that we met among them are Bo Adams right here. Bo showed us a whole bunch of his collection and all the things that he's got of bottles and other goodies from the distillery, showing kind of labels and artwork and all this, not to mention the probably zillions of stories you got from over the years. And so that was very much appreciated, and it was just really kind of reaching out to the community around here, because we don't We don't live in Robertson County. We just have this connection from 100 years ago. But, you know, we felt enough to put ourselves wholly into it and really dive into it. And so, anyway, so that's where it started, just like figuring out truly how do we do this thing. And it was all, to use a corporate buzzword, it was networking. It was just meeting people and saying, hey, we're the Nelson brothers, we have this history that we just found out about it. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to resurrect this whole thing and seeing what it takes. And back at that time, like I said, this was 2006. So from 2006 to, let's say, 2009 was like just so, I mean, it was hours and hours and hours of being in this building, looking at the pictures, the city archive, or the state archives downtown Nashville. Talking to people around here, just doing every bit of research we possibly could and learning these little bits along the way. And so over the years, the story gathered enough sort of facts and enough of an arc that it really made sense to us. And so I'll tell you that whole story here in just a few minutes, I promise. So we got to the point where it was, Charlie could build a business plan in his final semester in college, and his one business class he has taken. To this day, I have 0 to my name, but he had this grand plan that by, it was 2006 then, so I think it was by 2013, I think he literally put on his business plan, take over the world. So in 7 years, we're dominating. So it didn't work out quite that way or that quickly, but we had high hopes and ambitions. And so all that to say, we got to the point where, okay, we have an idea of what this story is. Now, how do we incorporate that with the business? Well, as it turns out, it is the business. It is the reason that we started the business. We would never have gotten into the whiskey business if we didn't have this story and this relationship and our family, our triple great grandfather who ran the biggest distillery in the state of Tennessee and one of the largest in the country back in those days. And so it was just all this stuff that was totally undeniable in terms of our questioning, should we even do this? It was never a question. It was, it was totally a ready, fire, aim kind of thing. We're doing this. We better learn how. Building whatever analogy you want to use, jumping out of the plane and building the parachute on the way down. And as far as I feel, I would never have done it any other way. In so many ways, I feel like having a plan B is often dangerous, at least in my personal experience. It's because if you got a fallback plan, you're probably going to get lazy and do the fallback plan, or at least I would. So if this is one thing you're going to and you just know that you're going to succeed and you're going to do this with nothing else on the menu, God help you if you don't make it, because that's just the best kind of pressure that I and my brother can put on ourselves. So really just jumping in and doing it. And so anyway, so we have all this stuff kind of ready to go, this business plan, and I feel like I'm getting a whole lot more detail on this part than I probably should. So I'm going to start going back to the history portion. And what we really learned, we can talk about whatever you guys want. Titans preseason, I'm here for it. Just open, raise your hand, let's go. So what we really discovered was this, and pieced together through all the years, was that it started, you can go back to Adam and Eve if you really want to, but let's start in 1835 in a small town in Germany called Hagenau, where Charles Nelson was born. He's my great-great-great-grandfather. His father, my quadruple great-grandfather, John Philip, ran a soap and candle business there in Germany. And in 1850, he decided that he wanted to move the family to America. So he sold his soap and candle business and had all the family's earthly possessions and everything from that sale of the business converted to gold coin, and had special clothing made to hold all of the gold on his person, sewn into his clothing for the boat ride over to the U.S. And so this is, October 1850. He and his family got on board a ship called the Helena Sloman, his first German steamship to make the transatlantic journey. Took 3 voyages. Am I getting ahead of myself here? Forgive me, it's been several months since I've told this whole story. Since I am technically unemployed now, but it's pretty fun. with 3 kids. They'll keep you busy. So he hopped on this boat, the whole family, the Helena Sloan. They set sail for New York City from Hamburg. And while they were at sea, well, fun fact, this was the 3rd and final voyage that this ship would make. I hope that doesn't spoil anything, but I think you know where I'm going with this. On the previous 2 journeys also came a couple of other now well-known famous German immigrant families, and that is the Heinrich J. Heinz family of Heinz Food Group, and they settled in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, of course. And then also a German family, Henrik Steinweg, which was anglicized to Steinway, of Steinway pianos. Those 2 families came over to the U.S. from Germany, also on the Helena Sloman, but on previous voyages. These are little things that we pick up over the years. Another thing coming up here in a minute, there were big storms and high winds when they're in the middle of the Atlantic. They're actually quite close to the shore, but they're actually close to where the Titanic went down. Spoiler alert. And so somewhere off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada, when the boat springs a leak somehow and is slowly sinking. And over about a week, it's taking on enough water that they really need to get their stuff in gear, or they're all going down. Well, they see an American ship called the Devonshire pass nearby, so they do their Morse code signals and whatnot, SOS, whatever they would have said back in the day. I don't know what language they were speaking on Morse code. I imagine it was English. So, well, that didn't go well. Thinking off the top of my head here, folks. So anyway, the Devonshire comes nearby, and think of the movie Titanic, right? Where they're shipping passengers off on the little rescue diggings, kind of women and children first, and they're transferring them to the Helena Sloman. But it's still not exactly like calm seas, so they're big storms, and I also, Newfoundland, Canada, Titanic, we're talking icebergs, North Atlantic, it's cold. Not exactly tropical waters here. So in the transfer, all of the family gets to the Devonshire safely, but John Phillip, the father, my quadruple great-grandfather, is on board the very last rescue boat, and that boat capsizes in the middle of the transfer. Now, if you remember such things as 5 minutes ago, maybe 10 at this point, he is wearing the family fortune in gold sewn into his clothing, so it's not easy for him to swim. So he sinks to the bottom of the Atlantic quite quickly and leaves the rest of the family literally with nothing but the clothes on their backs, having just watched dad, husband drown with everything that they own. And so what could they do but keep on heading to New York City, where they get there, and this is another one of the fun facts that we found out over the years. So trying to paint the picture, I talked about the times of that Titanic. You've seen the movies, you've seen the pictures, blah, blah, blah. You can kind of have some idea of what's going on there in your head. But if you think about the movie Gangs of New York, anybody seen that? Well, that takes place in New York City in the 1850s. So that's a really crazy thing for me to think about. It was, many years ago now, probably 10 years ago now, where I was sitting on the couch on a Sunday. I think I was just hungover flipping through channels, and Gangs of New York came on, and it was a commercial back before we had, when we still had commercials or whatever, anybody still had to watch them. You know what I'm talking about. And it comes back from commercial, and there's this large panning shot of an old point in New York City. It says 5 Points area, New York City, 1850, 5. I can't remember exactly what year it was, but it was 1850s, and it just blew my mind thinking, oh, this image is what needs to be in my head now, of really putting myself in their shoes of how did they get here? It's enough to think, reading words on paper, the transmission of, there was a newspaper account in the Nashville, Tennessee, or let's see, what was it? It would not have been in Nashville. It would have been the Daily American from the day after the shipwreck, or rather the day after the passengers got transferred and made it to New York. Well, one of the captains of the ship kind of gave his account to a journalist. And so, anyway, just written on the pages, it's one thing to read these things. Factually, here's what happened, and then this piece broke, and blah, blah, blah. But to have a full-scale idea from Martin Scorsese on screen, and, you know, Bill the Butcher and all these fabulous, illustrious characters kind of populating the screen, it's so much easier to make it personal and identifiable. And so that was just a big thing in my mind to realize, okay, this is a real world. It's not just some story on paper, right? How long do I have?
You're good.
Okay. Wake up. So anyway, that was just a big thing to me, and realizing that really kind of fired me up even more about this. So anyway, so they get to New York with nothing but the clothes on their back, and they're in New York City in 1850. Well, Charles, he was 15 at this time. He's the oldest sibling. He actually, second oldest sibling. His older sister had moved already to Cincinnati prior to the whole family with her husband. But as they get there, Charles is the oldest sibling on the ship. He's 15 years old. And so now now he and Mom are head of the household after just watching Dad drown with everything they own. But if you remember what John Philip did back in his day in Germany, it was soap and candles, right? So Charles found work at a soap and candle factory in New York City called the Hayes and Schultz firm. He worked there for a couple years. That's what he knew about in the old country. And worked there for a couple years, and then the rest of the family ended up moving over to Cincinnati, Ohio, with his oldest sister. So Cincinnati is a place that I didn't know much about. Definitely couldn't spell it correctly, but there's two N's somewhere. Google it, somebody. I'm not going to tell you now. But what we found out was that Charles became a butcher there. And what we found out much later was that was just kind of the local trade. Cincinnati is known as Porkopolis, big pig farming town. So becoming a butcher there is not, a crazy idea. But as a butcher, he ended up learning a whole lot about the sales and production of whiskey. Now this was kind of intriguing to us because we had no idea, where is the connection here from, let's go from soap and candles to butchery to eventually, we knew he got into the whiskey business eventually. So what is the connection here? Well, it may not on the surface appear that obvious, but when you just think about the business flow of things, right? Raw goods. As a soap and candle maker, you're buying leftover fat from butchers, so butchers. Those are kind of your vendors for your raw goods to produce your soap and candles, right? As a butcher, you have this connection to distilleries and breweries because they're taking spent grain and spent mash from or wort if you're a brewery, whatever the hell they call that. Fun fact also, whiskey is just what beer wants to be when it grows up. So think of it that way. All right, and now I've lost it again. Anyway, as a butcher, your animals, while they're alive, are being fed by spent grain from nearby distilleries and breweries. So there are those connections, even though it's not like the final products don't necessarily have to do with one another. It's all about kind of the byproducts and the use thereof. And by the way, that's what almost every distillery still does nowadays. In breweries, they give their spent grain to farmers. They'll just pick it up and feed it to their livestock. Easiest way to, a good symbiotic relationship, because when that stuff is sitting on your distillery floor and it's good and hot in there, it doesn't take that long to become the worst smell you have ever encountered in your whole life. So that's pretty good. So it works out well. So then Charles gets married. This is an interesting little thing. So his first wife's name is Louise, and he has one son named Charles in Cincinnati. And then his wife passed away, and he moved down to Nashville, just about 1858, I believe. And he starts his own wholesale grocery business down on what is now known as 2nd Avenue, downtown Nashville. Back then it was Market Street. And he really goes through a few iterations of business partners and such. Marries, his second wife's name was Louisa, so there's Louise and then Louisa. The guy had a type. and Anyway, so the main thrust of this whole idea is that he had a foundation of his business, his grocery business, and that was the 3 best-selling products, which were coffee, meat, and whiskey. So not a bad deal. So he wasn't yet distilling the whiskey; it was being distilled. You guessed it, Robertson County, Tennessee, in Brier, at this what was then still a fairly small distillery, but it's what we now know as, really back then they knew it as rectifying. You might call it sourcing nowadays, or contract blending, contract production. But basically, he was buying this whiskey and branding it himself with the label, Greenbrier Tennessee whiskey with that beautiful, amazing label on it. And so that was the whiskey.